Hello and welcome back to Hosting with the Most. I'm Jordan, a college student with a passion for party hosting. In my last video, I explained how I chose a theme and began considering logistics like the where, when, and how. And this video is all about the what. Specifically, what themed food and drinks to make for my party without breaking the bank or creating unnecessary food waste. As my party was a fairy tea party, I specifically wanted to make tea sandwiches for my guests. I found 4 different varieties online, which included a smoked salmon with herb butter, cucumber and dill spread, an open-faced caprese, and a roasted veggie with hummus. I also wanted a hot appetizer and found a recipe for puff pastry croque monsieur bites, which were delicious. And I wanted 2 possible dessert options, so I made a caramel chocolate tart and a batch of lemon blueberry scones. Now I recognize that this is a lot of items. You do not have to make that many items if you are throwing a party. It is totally up to you how much food you want to make and how it is served. I specifically chose finger foods as those are easy to grab and easier to prepare quite often, and I didn't want to deal with having a big casserole dish and not knowing where to put it in a smaller space in my apartment. However, if you're feeling a 3-course meal or you're feeling a potluck, it's totally up to you, and whatever fits the theme of your party is perfect, as long as you have enough food for your guests. If they're people you're familiar with, you can probably estimate how much they're going to eat, but if not, I would try to estimate that you make 2 to 3 dishes so people can grab things and eat accordingly, or make bigger dishes that people can serve themselves with. And if you have leftovers, you can use them for later, which I'll talk about in a second. As for where I got my recipes, I found them all online, but you can totally use recipes from cookbooks, family recipes, wherever you usually source from and feel most comfortable cooking from. I specifically like online blogs because I can always go back and refer to them whenever I need. And there's recipe comments about people trying different variations of the recipe or asking questions that you might have about how long things can be frozen or pre-prepared, which is super helpful for things like party planning. But one thing that you should be wary of if you use online blogs is the amount of advertisements. It takes a very long time to get to the recipe, and often the website can be glitchy because of the sheer amount of advertisements on a page. If that is a problem for you, I highly recommend plugging the URL of your cooking website into justtherecipe.com, which removes all advertisements and just gives you your list of ingredients and your steps. So much easier, so much nicer to read. And then let's talk about the cost analysis that you should do before you go shopping. This is a step you can do before shopping or after. I recommend before. The prices that you get from the app or website of your grocery outlet will not always be the most up to date by the time you go, depending on how far away you go from the time and the fluctuating market prices, but it will give you a good enough estimate of how much money you're going to spend. Basically, because my menu was so extensive, I wanted to get a good idea of how much I was actually going to spend, as I had tried to choose recipes that had items I already had in my pantry or fridge, but there were still things I would have to go purchase. I used a spreadsheet, which is also linked in the complimentary PDF guide, where I broke down the exact amount of every ingredient being used, the full item cost, and the cost per usage to figure out what the exact cost per guest for each recipe was. I then used the sum of those recipe costs to figure out how much the party food would cost me. The grocery bill came to $157, but the amount actually spent on guests was $94.50, and around 60% of the total bill would go towards the party food served that night, but the remaining 40% would go towards my personal meal plans. After preparing each recipe, I would keep track of which items had leftovers to incorporate them into my meal plan for the rest of the week. The cheese remaining from the croque monsieur bites made for a really great grilled cheese. I put the leftover dill spread on my toast the next morning, and the leftover heavy cream, which I bought for the caramel tart, made for a great garlic cream pasta sauce. The $94.50 divided between the 10 of us on the night of the party averaged around $9.45 per guest, while the remaining $62.50 split into the next 10 days of meals averaged around $6 of purchased food used per day. Either way, none of the food went to waste, so it was definitely a cost-effective trip and a cost-effective meal planning. If you want more details on how exactly I did this, I would refer to the spreadsheet linked in the complimentary PDF guide, where I go into more detail of how exactly I did the division to get my costs. I also really recommend searching for deals and coupons through your local supermarket's app or website. I used the Safeway app to scan as many deals on ingredients as I could, and was also able to get $5 taken off the entire purchase. But you could also try programs like Too Good To Go, which is an app that lets you know when cafes and grocery outlets donate their leftovers or near expired products, which are often baked goods and produce, for cheap. I've used it a couple of times, and it's always great. I got a dozen bagels for $2, and it was great because you're helping the company out and reducing food waste in your neighborhood. Lastly, when it comes to actually cooking food for your guests, make sure you have a preparation plan. Because my menu was so large, I needed to plan out times to prepare certain elements ahead of time, which included making balsamic glaze and thawing pie dough and all sorts of other things. But it's useful to create a schedule so you don't end up overwhelmed with assembling things at the last second or are too busy to actually spend quality time with your guests. The more items are pre-prepared, the less stress on the day of. And that's all for this video, and I'll see you in the next one.